What happened to my life? Things used to make sense. There were things I knew. What was good, what was bad, who I was. Things that I guess I just took for granted. Because at some point I must have turned away, Stopped paying attention, taken my hand off the wheel. And everything just got away from me. Now my old familiar points of reference are gone, and those things I thought I knew before, well, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure of anything anymore. Maybe that sounds melodramatic. Maybe it is. But how else can I make sense of what happened? How else can I explain that I watched both seasons of Titans? For those of you who don't know, Titans is a live-action superhero series that debuted in 2018 on the DC Universe streaming service. After Warner Media restructured its streaming services and converted DC Universe into a digital comics platform, its video content was migrated to HBO Max, which is where I watched Titans. All of it. Titans is not good. It's an adaptation of the Teen Titans, one of the most popular comic book superhero teams, and it features some of my favorite characters, particularly Dick Grayson. So it could have been good. The source material was strong. But it's not good. It's bad. It starts bad. It's bad in the middle. It ends bad. It's a bad show. The show is bad. So why did I watch it? Why didn't I just stop? What's wrong with me? I guess maybe the best place to start is with what made me want to watch the show in the first place. Like I said, the Teen Titans comics are something I've enjoyed throughout my life as a superhero nerd, especially the classic New Teen Titans run in the 1980s by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. Dick Grayson in particular might be my favorite comic book character ever, and though he's appeared in live-action projects before, he's never really been done justice. Sorry, Chris. Nothing personal. You were good in Scent of a Woman, and I'm sure your NCIS spinoff is fine. Jesus Christ, has that show really been on for 12 years? When the hell did... No, one existential crisis at a time. Anyway, adaptation of Teen Titans, another shot at a decent live-action Dick Grayson. That was the hook that reeled me in initially, which makes sense, because, as I said, he's my favorite... Wait, no, that doesn't make sense either, because before I watched the show, I saw the trailer that made the show look like the humorless, grimdark slog that, it turns out, it is. Robin growling, "Fuck Batman," is in the trailer. Ooh, so gritty. It was an honest trailer. I'll give the show that much. It came out right from the beginning and said, "Steve, don't watch. You're gonna hate this." But I watched it anyway, and I did hate it. And then I kept watching. Why? Maybe it was the train wreck effect. Yes, the show was awful, but it was such a colossally ill-conceived disaster that I just couldn't look away. That might be something, because Titans gets so much, so wrong, that it is kind of fascinating. Ghoulishly, horrifically fascinating. The problems with Titans begin with its tone. This is a grim show, you all, and while it's certainly true that the source material, particularly the aforementioned Wolfman and Perez New Teen Titans comics, had a much lighter tone and were just a lot more fun, generally speaking, I don't object to the tone of the Titans TV series because it's different from the comics. That's a perfectly reasonable preference to have, like what you like, but it's not a very sound criticism. So the Teen Titans TV show has a different tone than some of the source material. So what? That doesn't automatically mean it's not going to be good. The dark tone of Titans is an issue because, for one thing, it almost never lets up. Most of the show is just unrelentingly bleak. And for another, there's nothing all that compelling happening within all that darkness. The producers of Titans have confused dark with interesting. Those producers include Akiva Goldsman, who wrote the screenplays for Joel Schumacher's decidedly not dark Batman films, and whose presence on the creative team here makes this show feel like a belated and misguided act of overcompensation. There's a disparity between the show Titan seems to want us to think it is and the show it actually is. Apparently, the idea is that Dick Grayson was once an idealistic, upstanding crusader for justice, but now he's vicious and tortured and struggling to control his barbaric impulses. But despite the frequent use of flashbacks, we never see that idealistic younger version of Dick. Nor do we get the sense that he's wrestling with the violence he commits, nor does the series itself do much to show us that the brutality Dick and the other heroic characters visit upon the criminals they encounter is unwarranted. When we meet Dick Grayson in the first episode, he's ended his partnership with Batman and left Gotham City. He's now a police detective in Detroit. Way to try and outrun the darkness there, Dick. It's here that he meets Rachel Roth, a troubled teenage girl with powerful psychic abilities she doesn't yet understand, whose mother has just been murdered. The other detectives give Rachel's case to Dick because Dick has the reputation of being especially interested in helping kids. Once again, the show is telling us something that it never shows us. Despite what his fellow cops say about him, Dick doesn't seem all that interested in helping anyone, including kids. And his first interaction with Rachel, the traumatized teenager he's supposedly predisposed to help, isn't any different than how we've seen him relate to other characters. He's tight-lipped and surly and does nothing to put Rachel at ease or encourage her to think of him as someone she can trust. He's just as much a miserable bastard to her as he is to everyone else, but for whatever reason, she still forms this unbreakable bond with him because that's what the show's plot requires. The excessive grimness doesn't just apply to Dick. Nearly all the other protagonists are either straight-up murderers or placed in positions where they're given no choice but to kill or at least brutally maim someone else. Corey uses her superpowers to torch multiple people to death and also snaps a helpless bad guy's neck just to show off her versatility, I guess. Hawk and Dove are every bit as vicious when fighting bad guys as Dick. Rachel uses her healing abilities to save the life of Dr. Adamson, only to later rescind her healing, killing him. Jason Todd, Dick's replacement as Robin, openly revels in the violent acts he commits against anyone who opposes him, crooks, cops, whoever. Gar, aka Beast Boy, who can transform into a tiger, is captured and tortured and eventually kills his tormentor while in tiger form, though at least he does feel bad about it later. And does Donna Troy kill anybody? I don't think so. Though I might be forgetting, because there are so many murders committed by the heroes in this show, it's entirely possible one slipped my mind. It's like the creators of the show read Teen Titans comics, then decided, for reasons I cannot begin to fathom, that their show would be better if they replaced the majority of the team with clones of the Punisher. The level of violence in the show is over the top and gratuitous, and again, this isn't necessarily a problem. Some of my favorite films ever are incredibly violent. The Wild Bunch, anyone? But Titans is so violent and so grim so often that there's no contrast. Throughout both seasons of the show, we see the characters expressing concerns that they themselves or someone else is about to cross the line, which makes no sense because we see these heroes maiming and killing people all the time anyway. The finale of Season 1 is centered on Dick being trapped in a fantasy created by Rachel's demonic father, where he returns to Gotham to stop Batman from killing the Joker. There's a scene early on when Jason turns up at Dick's house in LA, which is just bad writing, Nightwing hates LA, to tell him that things in Gotham have gotten really bad, and I'm pretty sure I laughed out loud when he said that because, what, were they not bad before? I guess at this point it's gotten as bad as Bloodhaven. Also, why would Jason care? Is that supposed to be a marker of just how bad things have gotten? Even Jason is all murdered out? This episode comes at the end of a season where we've seen numerous brutal acts of murder committed by the heroes, who in almost every case are shown to be utterly unrepentant. But for some reason, Batman killing the Joker is such an upsetting prospect that Dick is willing to travel from one side of the country to the other in order to prevent it. Speaking of Batman, he doesn't actually show up in the first season, a few fleeting appearances during Dick's fantasy sequence in the finale aside, but we sure do hear a lot about him, and the way Dick tells it, he's just the worst. Dark, violent, manipulative, emotionally abusive. I'm pretty sure the term borderline psychopath is used to describe him. But when Bruce Wayne does become a recurring character in season 2, he seems fine? Rational, self-aware, regretful that his relationship with Dick has gone down the toilet, concerned with the increasingly out-of-control behavior of Jason. So has Bruce just changed, like, a lot in the year or so since Dick left? Or is Dick that unreliable of a narrator, at least where Batman is concerned? Because it's impossible to imagine this Bruce Wayne as the darkest of dark nights Dick's always complaining about. It's difficult to imagine this Bruce Wayne as Batman, period, but that is the least of this show's problems. In fact, Ian Glenn's portrayal of Bruce winds up being one of the bright spots of the series. And when I say bright, I am speaking relatively. Most of the bright spots in Titans are fairly dim, all things considered, but the rest of the show is so dark that they shine a lot more intensely than they probably should. Everything is dark, visually and thematically. Everyone is angsty and gloomy. Of the regulars, my favorite character is Beast Boy, and that's not because he's a remotely well-written character, but because in most of the episodes in which he appears, he's the only one whose personality has modes other than angry and or sullen. Maybe I've just been spoiled by the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because this version of the Titans is the most glum, dismal, depressing collection of heroes I've seen in a long time. In something not directed by Zack Snyder, anyway. They're probably not worse as individuals, but the fact that there are more of them and that they talk to each other about their regrets and their dark secrets and how much they don't like each other, it just piles on and on and on, so that the cumulative effect is amazingly, impressively, even more ghastly than Snyder's Superman. In fact, much like the Zack Snyder version of Superman, if it weren't for the fact that we're familiar with the characters already from other media, there'd be no reason to think of these people as heroes at all. We almost never see them acting heroically. They occasionally pay lip service to the importance of what they do, which is apparently supposed to include helping and protecting people, but we don't get to see them actually, doing that. Their conflicts with villains are almost entirely personal in nature. As a result, instead of good guys versus bad guys, it feels like we're watching one group of people with superpowers and or special training fight another group of people with superpowers and or special training simply to further grudges and settle scores. Because that is what it really means to be a hero. Sometimes those grudges aren't even between the Titans and their foes, but between the Titans them fucking selves. The show tries time and again to wring drama and angst out of the team breaking up, but it doesn't really work because they never feel like the family they're supposed to be. With few exceptions, primarily Rachel and Gar, who do eventually develop something that feels like genuine closeness, the Titans seem like they don't even like each other all that much. Even during the flashbacks set in the supposedly good old days, instead of rooting for the team not to break up, I found myself wondering why they ever formed a team in the first place. There are also issues with the plotting and pacing of the series. That's not so unusual. Many streaming services have had similar problems. The new Star Trek shows have had them, ditto for the Marvel Netflix shows, and they're all way, way, way better than this. But even though these problems aren't unique to Titans, they're still problems that affect Titans. And that's not good, because this show has enough wrong with it without getting into its shoddy plotting and pacing. So let's get into its shoddy plotting and pacing. I'll give you an example from the end of Season 1 and the beginning of Season 2. Season 1 builds up to the arrival of Rachel's demon father, Trigon. He's described as this scary, world-dominating evil. He's such a dire threat to pretty much everything that Kori was sent to Earth from her home planet to find and kill Rachel, because Trigon needs Rachel to cross over to this dimension. In a rare but welcome example of a hero choosing not to murder somebody, Corey decides that rather than kill Rachel, she'll help the team defeat Trigon some other way. So Trigon finally arrives, and he's just a dude? And his plan is to use his psychic powers to turn the other Titans to the dark side, which, again, is hilarious considering the fact that they've spent the entire season up to this point mangling and murdering people. And by doing that, to break Rachel's heart, which is important for some reason, I have no idea. Anyway, he turns everyone to the dark side, except for Gar, who manages to pull Rachel back from the brink, and she finds the resolve she needs to face down her father, and she walks out into the yard of her mother's farmhouse to confront Trigon, who has hulked out into his demonic form, and Trigon's just kind of standing there, doing nothing, in no hurry to take over the world or destroy the world or whatever he wants to do. And Rachel's like, hey, I'm not going to let you do that thing you want to do, whatever it is. And she uses her powers to disintegrate him. And that's it. No more Trigon. That was easy. Part of me thinks I should be grateful that the show didn't force me to sit through a tedious head-to-head battle between Rachel and Trigon, one which would no doubt have been rendered in terrible-looking cheap CGI, but it still feels pretty anticlimactic. The plotting and pacing issues persist into Season 2, where Deathstroke wants to kill the Titans because they killed his son, except it turns out they didn't kill his son, and also the Titans have been around this whole time, and Deathstroke hasn't been trying to kill them, but once they get the team back together, he decides to kill them because he doesn't want them to be a team, so he tries to break up the team first, then kill them, but then he decides not to kill them as long as they permanently break up the team. And Dr. Light is involved somehow in a way that ultimately doesn't matter, and also Dick gets him kind of a self-pitying snit and swears off helping people because he's just been living to help others up to this point, I guess, and gets himself intentionally thrown in prison because that's where he belongs. But then he changes his mind and breaks out of prison and decides to go back and lead the Titans again after all, and I guess everybody's just gonna forget that he's an escaped felon, even the cops. And those are just a couple of examples. I could go on. It's not an especially well-written show, is my point. Have I forgotten anything? Oh yeah, aesthetically, the show feels like a car commercial a lot of the time. Sometimes this is due to blatant product placement. If they're not getting money from Dodge, they missed a huge opportunity. And other times it's due to lazy, generic direction. And when it's not giving off car commercial vibes, the gratuitous violence, grim, self-serious tone, cheap special effects, obvious heavy-handed color correction, and other amateurish qualities make it feel like one of those gritty, humorless fan films that started popping up on the internet about 10 to 15 years ago and then seemed to die off. Except, apparently they didn't stay dead. So, yeah, train wreck, can't look away, that must be the reason. Except, I don't think that's all of it. Titans is compelling in its comprehensive awfulness, but it's not as though there was anything enjoyable about watching it, even the shameful thrill of watching something so awful. I wasn't riveted in fascinated horror. Finishing the series demanded a certain amount of determination on my part. As morbidly bewitching as the train wreck might be, once looking at it starts to hurt, you turn away, right? Unless you're a masochist, which I'm not. Or at least, I never used to think I was. There's something else going on in Titans that might account for why I kept coming back despite it being a bad show. It's the fact that, for as shitty as it is, the show has promise. Off the top of my head, I can't think of another recent series that is this terrible that had so much going for it. For example, the cast is really good. Or at least they perhaps could be if given better material. Brenton Thwaites definitely looks the part of Dick Grayson. He has charisma and screen presence, and in the few fleeting moments of the series where he's not either brutalizing a criminal or self-flagellating over brutalizing criminals too much, he shows flashes of charm and comic timing that are well suited to a version of Dick that isn't this. As Corey, Anna Diop projects the confidence and authority you'd expect from someone who is royalty on her home planet, but given that she's also an interplanetary fugitive in hiding, she comes across as appropriately sympathetic as well, when she's not straight up murdering people with fire, I mean. As Donna Troy, Connor Leslie strikes a good balance between sarcastic and supportive, coming across as the big sister to the rest of the group. Donna is also one of the few characters we get to see actually do something heroic to save the lives of civilians, which is nice. And Curran Walters is damn near perfect as Jason Todd, the smart-ass little punk. You just want to snatch a hold of him. But unless you've had advanced martial arts training, you probably shouldn't. Beyond the main cast, some of the guest stars and recurring players are pretty solid too. I already mentioned Ian Glenn as Bruce Wayne. Esai Morales as Deathstroke? Come on, how perfect is that casting? And when Joshua Orpin shows up as Superboy halfway through season 2, dude looks like he stepped right out of a comic book. He also gets to save some people in between murders, and he has Crypto the Superdog! How fun! Hi, Crypto, who's a good... Oh my fucking god, why? Crypto too? I know it was a bad guy, but did he deserve to get blown the hell up like that? What is wrong with the writers of this goddamn show? Must there be blood on the hands of every hero? Even the pure white paws of the Superdog? The most intriguing aspect of the show might be the fact that it takes place in what seems to be a more or less fully realized version of the DC Comics universe. When I was a kid, I longed for a show like this. Back then, superhero shows and movies typically took place in worlds where the hero at the center of that show was the only hero around. Like in Christopher Reeve's Superman films, you definitely don't get the impression that Batman or Wonder Woman or The Flash are also running around doing stuff off screen. The Flash running around. I didn't even mean to do that. Kind of funny. Didn't even have to write it. It just came out that way. You see? Things aren't that bad after all. No, I'm really very fortunate. Yes, I'm really extremely fortunate. Help! 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 Someone! Please! Someone! Today, we have things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or DC's Arrowverse on the CW that provide satisfying live-action equivalents of the comic book universes I grew up reading. But even they started with a single hero, Iron Man in the MCU, Green Arrow in the Arrowverse, with additional heroes showing up later. Titans begins in a mature, well-established DC Comics universe, a world full of superheroes, from headliners like the Justice League, who never actually appear but are mentioned from time to time, to C-listers like the Doom Patrol, more on them in a minute. And the origins and powers of the characters seem pretty close to their comic book versions. Corey / Starfire is an alien princess. She comes to Earth in a spaceship. Rachel / Raven's father is a demon from another dimension. Gar / Beast Boy can shapeshift into a tiger. They took these comic book characters that I love and their stories, and they actually brought them to life. They just did a really shitty job of it. And that's so frustrating because it's not like this is some Gordian knot. The superhero genre ain't that hard to get right. And even if it was, there are plenty of examples to follow to help the creators of new shows get it right. I've mentioned a few of them already. Christopher Reeve's Superman films, the first two at least, the MCU, the Arrowverse. There are also Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, the brilliant and beautiful Oscar-winning animated film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Christopher Nolan's Batman films, Batman the Animated Series and the entire DC animated universe that followed, the more recent direct-to-video DC animated movies. Some of them, anyway. A lot of the ones I've seen are shit, but a few are really quite good, most notably the adaptation of Darwin Cook's New Frontier, HBO's Watchmen series, and, I must admit, even Zack Snyder's Watchmen movie, which is the only Zack Snyder movie I am willing to admit to liking. And that's mostly because Snyder kept so much from the source material that there wasn't as much room for his usual Snydery bullshit. though he still managed to sneak in some close-ups of compound fractures, venerate Rorschach, and male gaze the shit out of every single female character because Zack Snyder is the worst. He's the worst. Even when he's not bad, he's the worst. I'm filled with hate and it's dragging me off topic. However, there's another example of a much better superhero show than Titans, and it's perhaps the most frustrating example of all because it's actually a spin-off of Titans. Doom Patrol. The main difference between Titans and Doom Patrol is that Doom Patrol is good. And in one way, that isn't surprising. The Doom Patrol is introduced in a first season episode of Titans, and it's the best episode by far of the entire series. There are jokes and likable characters. It's fun. Those qualities are carried over to the Doom Patrol series, where we meet these characters again. Well, not the exact same characters. While Doom Patrol is also set in what seems to be a fully established version of the DCU, the Arrowverse version of Crisis on Infinite Earths establishes that Titans and Doom Patrol do take place on separate Earths. So technically, the Doom Patrol we meet in that Titans episode is the Earth 9 version, which is different than the Doom Patrol in the Doom Patrol series, which is set on Earth 21. But that's not relevant to any of the events in the series, and in fact, it's the sort of useless trivia only a massive dork would even notice. Anyway, all that isn't to say that Doom Patrol is just wall-to-wall wackiness. Oh, there's wackiness aplenty! A critical plot point in the first season finale hinges on a giant cockroach making out with a giant rat so that a robot man swallowed by the rat can crawl across their tongues into the roach. But Doom Patrol is also frequently dark and kind of brutal. Its characters are all sad and haunted and damaged in their own ways. Their conflicts are just as much with each other as with villains. But unlike Titans, there's more to Doom Patrol, the characters and the show overall, than graphic violence and endlessly self-perpetuating misery. And we see the members of the Doom Patrol, who, especially early on, repeatedly remind themselves and us that they aren't superheroes, act more selflessly and heroically than almost any of the Titans. They put themselves at risk to help the innocent and each other, and they confront their own demons, not through moping and brooding and self-recrimination that ultimately goes nowhere, but in meaningful ways that lead to character growth. Plus, Doom Patrol has Cyborg, who is traditionally a member of the Titans, and Beast Boy starts out with the Doom Patrol, but leaves to join the Titans. Oh, poor kid. Did he lose a bet or something? Do you think he calls Doom Manor every now and then to see if his old room is still available? He totally should. I bet the Doom Patrol is a lot more fun to live with than his current roommates. Especially the Earth 9 version of Larry. He seems like a blast. So, yeah, other movies and shows, including shows closely related to Titans, have done a much, much better job at adapting superhero stories than Titans does. But it's not just other shows. There are all too brief moments during Titans itself, interludes between brutally violent action scenes and scenes of characters having fraught conversations about the heavy burden of their sins, when we get tantalizing, soul-crushing peeks at the show it might have been. My favorite of these scenes comes in the next-to-last episode of Season 2, titled Faux Hawk. The title is a reference to a subplot about how Hawk has hit rock bottom, though what that even means in a show where virtually every character is continuously crashing through one rock bottom after another, I have no idea, and sold his superhero costume to some random guy who has been wearing it while posting videos to Instagram in order to boost his following. But that's not the good part. The good part comes when Dick, who renounced his identity as Robin and even burned his Robin costume, pulls up to a charming little establishment called Stu's Homemade Shoes. Inside, he encounters Stu, played by Curry Graham, who, like Esai Morales, is also an alumnus of NYPD Blue. In fact, Curry Graham's character, Lieutenant Bale, replaced Esai Morales' character, Lieutenant Rodriguez, as leader of the detective squad at the start of the final season, which I didn't realize until I was writing the script for this. It's kind of cool, right? 2 former regulars from NYPD Blue on the show, and it's one guy who took over for the other guy. Can I just keep talking about NYPD Blue? Do I have to go back to Titans? Titans doesn't have Jimmy Smits. It doesn't even have Mark Paul Gosselaar. And what kind of name is Mark Paul anyway? His parents wanted to name him after a New Testament author, but they couldn't just pick one? What the hell? It's okay. It's okay. I'm okay. It's okay. What am I getting so worked up about? I'm talking about one of the good parts of Titans. There's no reason to get upset. This is fine. Anyway, Dick goes to the shoe shop, and inside there's Stu, and Dick is like, "Hey, how's it going, Stu? So, listen, man, I need a new pair of shoes." And Stu is giving him major attitude. He's like, "Sorry, I don't make shoes anymore. I make fruitcake now." And Dick's like, "Okay, then I need a new fruitcake." And Stu's like, "Oh, really? Because you didn't seem too happy with that last fruitcake I made you." Dick's like, "What happened to that last fruitcake was nothing personal, Stu." And Stu says, "Fruitcake is my life, man. Oh, I know. Maybe you'd like this fruitcake better if I set it on fire. Is that how you like your fruitcake? Dick? On fire?" So yeah, it turns out that Stu is like Batman's version of Q. Not that one. Better. No. Also acceptable. Stu takes Dick into the back of the shoe shop, which is where Stu and his staff make gadgets for Batman and his allies, and they show Dick the new suit they've made for him because Bruce called ahead and told them to expect Dick to stop by. Because Bruce is such an abusive monster. How dare he anticipate the needs of his former partner and use his resources to help him? When will you atone for the lives you've destroyed, thoughtful Bruce Wayne? Anyway, it's the Nightwing costume, and we see it in the next episode, and it looks awesome. That's another thing the show gets right. The costume design is pretty solid. It almost has finger stripes. Why couldn't they just give it finger stripes? But I digress. The scene between Dick and Stu works really well. Curry Graham plays the proud, affronted Stu to perfection, and Brenton Thwaites gets to actually show some light comedy chops as Dick, absorbing Stu's sarcasm with a combination of sheepishness, resignation, and impatience to get on with it. The actors have good chemistry with each other. The scene leans into the absurdity of the whole superhero thing. It's funny, but also manages to hit some nice character beats, like when Stu drops his bruised ego routine over Dick burning his Robin costume and invites him to the back to see the new suit. Or when Dick admires the suit and says to Stu and his assistant Lily, "You've outdone yourselves," and Stu replies, "I know." Needs more Stu, is basically my review of the series in summary. And Lily, she seems cool. Maybe the show should just be about Stu and Lily and the rest of the team at the shoe shop, and each episode can be about them having to invent some new gadget to solve a problem for Batman or one of his superhero buddies. And can that be season 3? But, dear God, they've already announced a season 3, and Barbara Gordon's gonna be in it. I love Barbara so much. Her and Dick are my OTP. But the Joker's going to be in it too, apparently, and Jason Todd is going to become the Red Hood. If a show that's already this grim and joyless is going to incorporate the Killing Joke and a death in the family, I can't. I can't do it. No way am I watching a 3rd season of this show. No way. You had your chance, Titans, but I'm out. That's it. I'm out. I'm out. I'm free. Does season 3 have a release date yet?